Welcome to Evolving Waves. We are super excited to kick off our first episode of our new podcast. This has been in the works for about a year worth of planning. We've had the idea sitting there and just kind of stewing on it, talking to some people in the industry, and we have decided to launch this podcast. So super excited to finally kick it off. Thank you for tuning in. I have the wonderful JD Wood, who is our marketing director here at Stingray Branding. She's actually going to be helping interview for the first episode here. JD, welcome.
Hi, I'm so excited that we are finally kicking this off. It has been a long time coming. With further ado, let's go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, let's do
So,
it.
hi, Alan, how are you?
Good. How about you?
I'm good. So, I think to start off, we're kind of just gonna discuss of what has inspired you to start this podcast, and just kind of going into what the podcast is going to be about going forward.
Uh, Whenever you think of the great stories that Hollywood has come out with and made movies about, and the books that you like to listen, like to read into that are like personal development focused, or the stories that usually captivate your attention, it's typically got a couple of elements in it. One is usually somebody that had a dream, had a great big goal, or had some great success going on, and then they went through an incredible adversity, and that's usually what creates your drama in the movie or the episode. And then on the other end of it, they're able to take some things that they learned and apply them, and whenever they do so, usually the second time around, or sometimes third or fourth time around, it's much better than what they had the first time. And it was hard to go through the process and the trials and tribulations, but that overcoming adversity feeling produces some great success. So I'm looking forward to bringing those stories of everyday people that have accomplished great things through adversity to all of our listeners.
Awesome. And then, so with that said, with us bringing these amazing stories to our listeners, how do you envision evolving waves into making a meaningful impact to our listeners?
So I think I've gone through my fair share of adversity over the last 16 years of being in business, and had my own couple failed marriages and relationships, and uh, my time in the military and whatnot. And whenever I've had to go through large periods of adversity that I wanted to throw in the towel, and there's a few times that we're gonna have some future episodes about where I got pretty close to quitting everything that I'd worked for years. And in those moments, what kept me going were thinking about some of the people we're actually going to have on the podcast in the next couple of weeks, and their stories and the adversity that they overcame. And then, some of the stories you hear about on YouTube, personal development books that I was reading. And they kept me in the game, and I'm thankful that they did, because what we have today is much bigger than what I had ever envisioned. And I think that those stories will hopefully help to encourage our listeners. And I hope that some of the lessons that the guests that we have on here, the knowledge that they're going to be able to share, will help people that are going through that same thing in their life currently, and maybe shortcut some of the adversity time for them.
So with that said, so obviously you're our first guest on our second episode, and then we have some other guests lined up for the next few episodes. So can you share a little bit about the criteria you have for selecting guests to feature on the podcast?
Three core elements that we talked about there at the kickoff are the things we're really going to be looking for, right? So they got to have either a dream, a low starting point potentially, right? They're building something from the ground up, or they were put in a position of success in that area and had to go through an adversity and then regain success in that same area, right? So we're looking for, the people we're going to have on are going to be people that either, started out with a dream with like no money, right? They didn't have the trust fund, they didn't have any of that stuff, and they had to build their business from the ground up. Or maybe they were in a position of owning a business that had accomplished a lot, but then COVID hit or something else hit that ruined their business and they had to rebuild it. Um, we will have a couple people on here soon that went through absolutely awful relationships and marriages, lost everything, gave up everything to get out of a terrible situation, learned a lot through that process, and now have very successful, happy relationships on the other side of it. Um, and then lastly, I think the third type of person or that we'll have on here will be um, people that have gone through sports challenges and athletic challenges, right? So maybe they started at a really large weight and they went through the process of losing all of that. And, anybody that's been in the gym knows that that is incredibly difficult to do and requires a ton of discipline. Or people that maybe had lots of success at the high school level, had to maybe transfer out to a JUCO school and then come back into D1 and have success there. So basically, that's the core foundation that we're looking for. Those stories of people that have overcome significant hurdles to reach success in the end.
Obviously, with the premise of the podcast, we are diving very deep into people's
Mhm.
personal lives. So, how do you plan on creating a safe and supportive space for guests to share those stories of overcoming their challenges?
We're going to have on are going to be ones that have already seen the back end of this, so they're happy to share their stories and open up. Obviously, we expect that people are listening in are not going to utilize the things that they're hearing from a negative perspective, and ideally are going to be utilizing the stuff that they're learning through our podcast to enhance and improve their own lives and hopefully overcome the adversities that maybe they're going through in their lives. Um, Whenever if we're going through a certain podcast that has maybe some information in it that could be derogatory or potentially hurt somebody's reputation, we'll usually ask them to maybe change names and things like that, so that we don't have any type of significant personal information that's out there. The focus that we want to have with our guest is on the actual story and the actual lessons that are learned going through their process.
What ways do you think the podcast could inspire or motivate others facing similar adversities?
Just getting to kind of hear how low some people can have gotten in going through that adversity. Hopefully you're not at the same point, or if you are, then getting to hear the back end of that story and what's to come, right? What can be made of the mess that you may be in. Um, and for those that aren't going through anything right now and life is great, then it'll hopefully just be some podcast of kind of inspiration. Maybe your life is going pretty good for you and you're comfortable. So hearing about some of the stories that people are going through and what they've accomplished might be the thing that you need to motivate you to go from a place of complacency to kind of getting back on the horse and pushing a little bit further and doing a little bit more with your life, or maybe even inspiring you to give back to the people in your life, instead of so just kind of hanging out, right? So I think that in life we're always going up or we're going down. There's never a constant line. You're either improving or you're losing. So trying to help people to realize that at any point you can reverse the direction of that line. You don't have to continue going down. It might be difficult. It might be very hard to make the decisions that are necessary to reverse that line. And for a period of time, you may even question whether or not it was the right decision. But on the back end of things, usually that line will start going up, and as long as you continue to push things forward and be open and self reflect, then you're able to continue to push that line forward or upwards or
Yeah.
upwards.
I think like another thing to highlight is that when you're going through challenges in life and it feels like everything is going wrong, that can feel very lonely.
I can.
And I think of having something like this, if somebody is going through something and they're able to find a story that they relate to, that could give them like a sense of community and not feel so lonely of like, okay, other people go through this. I'm not going through this by myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, people that come on as our that we're interviewing, my hope is that maybe some of them will open up to for outreach, so that people that may be going through something similar can potentially reach out to them and learn more and connect with them through their story. You never really know what things will turn into whenever you kick something like this off. There's lots of cool stories about that even. And my hope is that as we go through the episodes that are here and people get to hear some of these stories, that maybe it kicks off a great idea for them, or maybe a person that we bring on and somebody listening are able to connect and collaborate together. And um, one of the things that I launched, one of the companies that I've launched in the past, Great Business Networking, which is a chain of networking groups throughout the Charleston area and really the Southeast. We have groups all over the multiple cities, and multiple states throughout the Southeast. Um, One of the first guests that we're going to have on here actually launched his business through that network. And he's now one of the most successful Taekwondo studio owners in the Southeast. And he teaches workshops and classes about how to open up these gyms. And it's cool looking back thinking, like, man, we were just trying to launch this lunch group to get together and like meet other business owners and try to sell our stuff. And through the connections from that and some of the other events that we were putting on, he's been able to connect with people that have grown his business to a very large entity throughout the area. So I'm hopeful that maybe a year or 3 or 4 years from now, whenever we're on here, we're having somebody come on that we're able to interview that listened to this podcast, gained some cool knowledge, connected with somebody, and ended up, launching a 7-figure business, or, met the person of their dreams, or all those kinds of cool stories.
Kind of dive deeper into that as to like what are your long-term goals and aspirations for Evolving Waves?
For a marketing company, right? So from a marketing perspective, this gives us the ability to have some great business owners on here, that have some great lessons, and hopefully cover some marketing topics as well, from trial and error perspective and things of that nature. But really, it's intended to just be a holistic podcast. We really want this podcast to be kind of its own thing, um, and for it to open up the doors for us to be able to do more with the people that come on the podcast, the people that listen to it, and really just try to kind of give back. It's 16 years in the industry now. I've met thousands of people at networking events and that have been clients and so on. And um, the thing that I've always really enjoyed at all those things are getting to hear people's stories of what they've done, right? It's like one of the people we're gonna have on here in the next couple of weeks is he literally dropped out of school in 6th grade, and he couldn't read. His wife at the had to like teach like had to read the books to him that he wanted to read, like the personal development books and stuff they were going through. At one point, they couldn't pay their lot rent for their trailer, and from there, and I think he was in like his late 20s or 30s at that point, that he was like struggling to pay lot rent, which is I think was like $35 if I remember correctly from his story. And he launched one of the largest sign franchises in the country, did the signage for the Super Bowl and Disney and Subways and all kinds of stuff, and then ended up getting involved with the largest legal law firm network in the country that allowed people to sign up for legal memberships for a couple bucks a month. And he was the regional vice president for that company. Um, Brilliant guy, but literally, I mean, in his 30s, like couldn't pay a $30 lot rent, right? So it doesn't matter, where you are in your life. there's opportunity at any age in this country to overcome. And I hope that, from his perspective, from his story, people will be able to see where they're at and go, man, it like my life isn't quite that bad. And if he could do that, I can do so much. And I really hope that, in a few years from now, we're getting to hear those stories back from people that listened to episodes this year, got inspired, did something with it, and really accomplished something in their life from it.
Wow, I thoroughly cannot wait to like hear his story and like really dive deep into that because that sounds amazing. Um, so obviously you're in our second episode, you're officially our first guest
Mhm.
for the podcast and launching. So without going like too far, like what topics are you going to be covering as to, how this podcast relates to you?
The first couple episodes we're going to have, one of them is going to be on relationships, and another one's going to be on business. Those are two things that I feel like I have an uh, excessive amount of lessons learned in. Um, I get into business in high school. Was building website for my dad's company. I think in like eighth grade, ninth grade, on I think it was Microsoft Publisher back then, and pretty much all of the lessons that I learned in business have been self taught, predominantly through like trial and error, the wrong way, the way you don't want to go about learning lessons usually. Um, and I got a whole lot of them. I've restarted my company throughout the years. I've started 3 different businesses. I've been involved with 6 different business launches. So I've seen ways to do things and ways not to do things. And there were moments that I had to sleep in my car. I didn't have money to rent a hotel room. So I slept in my car in a parking garage in Charlotte. There were nights that I had to crash on my friends' couches because I didn't have any money to go anywhere. I didn't have the gas money to get anywhere, so I drove as far as I could, which was their neighborhood, and crashed on their couch until I could get up enough money to move on to the next place. Um, and so, I've gone from that position in business to being like as broke as you can possibly be to having you guys as my staff and having great recognition and the things that we've all been able to accomplish over the last couple of years, which looking back 10 years ago, if you had told me that was possible, I would have said, look, if I can just make like 30 or 40,000 bucks, I'd be happy at this point. If I can just have a job. um, and then relationship wise, I've dated some interesting people, married some interesting people, had some interesting lessons learned. I've gone through it. I've done the abusive thing, the narcissistic person, the crazy relationship that you could write a soap opera about. I'm pretty sure that if anybody from Hollywood is listening to that episode, we might get a call for a Netflix documentary afterwards. It's that crazy. So we're gonna go through that and what that was like, and the lessons learned, the red flags that I should have picked up on that I didn't, that I ignored, and what has come since then, and what can be, and what it took to make the decision to exit something so bad, um, and be willing to push through that, and what's come out on the other side.
It's going to be awesome to dive into. So, for us to kind of close out on this first episode, is there anything that you like want to add or say that you feel like hasn't been said?
So um, if you've got a great story, right? If you fit what we've been talking about, we'd love to have you on. We're not necessarily looking for a certain income level, a certain level of success necessarily. If you've got some lessons to share with the world, and you've got a story that's you're willing to be open and transparent about, we'd love to have you on. We've got about our first month and a half here of guests lined up, but we are currently recording and would love to schedule out from there. Um, and then, of course, I would not be a great entrepreneur if I did not plug our own company on our own podcast. So if you are a business owner anywhere in the world that is looking to generate leads or drive your marketing to new levels through web design, graphics, social, paid ads, mobile apps, or anything in the digital space, we would love to help you and would love to have an open, free conversation about what your goals are, your budget is, and how we can align with that to strategically drive revenue into your business. So, Stingray Branding is the platform hosting the podcast, and that is the marketing company that'll help you. I'm looking forward to our next episode, and thanks for being a wonderful host.
Well, thank you. I'm also looking forward to our next episode and really just getting this thing started and going.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. See you in episode 2.
Bye.